your kid has grown up and now he or she's an adolescent. How wonderful. So it's time to talk about their sex, sexual health, and sexual safety. One of the main concerns that a lot of parents have is pregnancy, especially if you have a daughter. What a lot of parents seem to overlook is that pregnancy is not the only risk associated with unsafe sex or unprotected sex. One of those other risks would be STIs. The large percentage of newly contracted STIs actually come from ages 15 to 24 years. And that risk only increases with children or adolescents that have unprotected sex or multiple sex partners. But before your child can be informed about all of this information, you need to be informed. So what is an STI? Like I said, it's a sexually transmitted infection. It can be viral or bacterial, and they can be transmitted during sexual intercourse or any other sexual activity. STIs can be prevented by a couple of things. One of the more obvious ones would be abstinence. No sexual intercourse, nothing, no sex. The only known contraceptive that is known to prevent STIs are condoms, even if they're not 100% effective. However, teenagers are also the least likely population to use condoms at all, even when they're very available. So another thing that people could use to prevent some of the risks that come with unprotected sex are contraceptives. The name is kind of inherent with what it does. Contraception, it prevents conception. So there are a lot of forms of contraception. There's the birth control pill, all the way to diaphragms, IUDs. So if your child walks up to you and starts asking you about contraceptives, don't be scared. It's understandable for them to be curious, and it's also kind of expected that they would want to know what sexual activities are. So for them to be asking about what contraceptives are in the first place does not always mean that they are having sexual activity. Access to emergency contraceptives could actually help them in the long run. They can help with STI and pregnancy prevention. After unprotected sex, there are only two ways to make sure that there's an unwanted pregnancy. That is through emergency contraceptives, or the morning after pill, or the use of an IUD, which has to be implanted with the use of a doctor and taken out with a doctor appointment. So what I explained in my last video was the book It's Perfectly Normal. It's by a person with the last name Harris, if you don't remember. It talks about sexual health and safety, talks about the bodily changes that a teenager would most likely encounter during puberty and after puberty. It also talks about how it's normal to feel attracted to others in a sexual way. What I really like this book is that it did include LGBTQ advice. It also talks about maintaining a healthy sexual relationship with your partner. Alright, so you passed the basics, all the information, or almost all of it. Now it's time for the talk. So what I said about the conversation with your children, the rules kind of apply to your teenagers as well. Teenagers who have warm and open relationships and conversations with their parents have a reduced risk of contracting STIs or getting pregnant. Again, the earlier the conversation, the better. But if you waited until they were a teenager to handle all the information, it doesn't mean that it won't have any effect. It's okay to express the values that you have to your child. It doesn't mean that you have to enforce these values. It just means that they still have the autonomy to pick whether or not they want to agree with you. But having them understand all the information is what's important. So if you really want your teen to delay sex, there are a couple ways that you could go about this. First, you gotta understand why it is that they want to have sex. Sometimes they say it makes them feel more like an adult, to which you can say you can exercise other ways to act like an adult or to feel like an adult. A lot of teenagers say that they feel that they're going to enjoy it. Tell them that there are other ways to have fun. Sex is not the only way to have fun with your partner. And a lot of the times, the benefits will not outweigh the risks. There are a lot of risks out there if you're not careful, and you should let them know that. One of the biggest reasons that a lot of teenagers have sex early is because they're pressured by their peers or they're comparing themselves to others. You should let them know that a lot of teens that have had sex early in life actually regret not waiting. Another reason that your teenager might throw at you is that they feel that they love their partner. So this is all about healthy relationships. Partners that really love you will not pressure you into doing things that you're unsure about, and let your child know that. There are other ways to show that you love a person. You can go on a date, give them gifts, everything else besides having sex. That is not the ultimate showing of affection. So what I really feel that should be getting across to your child is that it's okay to say no. It's okay to say no to sex. It's okay to say that you're not into it yet, not ready, because it's nobody's business except for themselves. But just because it's no one's business except for themselves doesn't mean that you don't have an influenced parents. That's why you're watching this. Another method at which you can help them delay sexual activity is just raising their self-esteem. Adolescents that have higher self-esteem have a greater chance of saying no to risky behaviors, i.e., sexual intercourse or sexual activity. But according to Planned Parenthood, there are quite a few ways that you could go about raising their self-esteem. Give praise their effort, give them choices, encourage realistic goals, enforce rules in private. Don't reprimand your children in front of their friends. That's not gonna get them anywhere. Avoid comparisons, especially if they have siblings. Take their problems seriously and take pride in one's culture. So the dreaded scenario for some parents, what if they're already having sex? You need to understand that adolescents have their own sex lives, just like parents have their own sex lives too. Just because they have their own sex lives doesn't mean that you can't help maintain it to make sure it's healthy. The number one thing that you need to be, which also is from my last video, is to be understanding, be warm. Talking about sex and sexual intercourse is embarrassing for both parties. You can make that clear with them. It's always gonna be uncomfortable, but it's also a conversation that you would want to have with your child. A big one that I covered in the last video and that I will stress here is to keep the conversation going. You always wanna make sure that the door is open. You don't want to be left in the dark about the possible risky behaviors that your child is messing around with. And you also need to educate yourself about the healthy components in a relationship. What makes this relationship healthy and what makes this relationship good? So a couple of questions you might want to answer are you open with your emotions? Do disagreements get resolved? Is there trust between them? Do you feel safe with them? So speaking about safety, we're gonna go back to contraceptive use. Dual contraception is very helpful. That would be like using a condom while you're also on the pill or you're also getting the shot. That's gonna be the best way to make sure that you're not going to have an unwanted pregnancy. There's one type of contraception that not a lot of people have heard of, but is on the rise. It's known as LARC, long-acting reversible contraceptives. The fail rate for these is less than 1%, but it also cannot be reversed without a doctor's appointment. Contrary to popular belief, it does not cause pelvic inflammatory disease. While the risks are a little bit higher the first 20 days after it implants, it actually decreases to a very low rate. It also does not cause infertility. There have been some studies that showed some people grew to be infertile after its use. But when researchers looked closely at those individuals, the LARC had nothing to do with it. So the battle for contraceptives is really hard. It's been a long political uphill battle. Contraceptives are typically needed in low SES communities. In these communities, sexual education is not always a priority, but it is also where more sexual assaults occur. So the political battle mostly resides in making over-the-counter drugs or OTC drugs. There are a lot of rules and regulations. Those rules and regulations are what's making it difficult to have access. There are many myths surrounding these drugs and other contraceptive uses, and that's just causing more regulations to fall upon them. What I feel that a lot of people seem to miss is that the United States has the highest teen pregnancy rates out of all the Western countries. And this is even with the decline taking into account. One of these examples is in New York. Over-the-counter emergency contraceptives are now available. They don't have to ask for age or for medical permission to buy these drugs. In fact, one of the reasons that it became legal was because it was considered demeaning towards women to withhold emergency contraceptives, even when it's an emergency. A couple of reasons that over-the-counter emergency contraceptives would be needed would be due to unprotected sex or, in one of the worst case scenarios, rape. So when we're talking about rape, we need to talk about abusive relationships. The questions that you should ask. I gave a few previous tips on how to check to make sure that your child thinking about whether or not their relationship is healthy. So here are a couple questions that you could ask if you're wanting to know if they're having a healthy relationship or if you're trying to convince them that they're not. Do they make you feel ugly or stupid? Does one always lack respect for the other? Do they pressure you into doing things that you're unsure of? Do they put you down because of the way you look or the way you are? Do you feel like they're trying to isolate you from others that you love to hang out with? One way that you could help in the prevention of abusive relationships is discouraging relationships with a large age gap. When there's a large age gap, the one who is older tends to be seen as more knowledgeable. Even in a relationship, it'll be really easy for your child to comply with someone who is older than them, especially into doing uncomfortable things. So you gotta know the signs of abuse. According to Planned Parenthood, here are the key signs that you would want to look out for. Depressed mood, isolation from friends and family, fear of their own partner, extreme jealousy or control, threats or intimidation, yelling, cursing, or verbal abuse. I know it seems like a heavy topic, but you can do this, parents. I have faith in you. So to wrap up, I'm gonna say for the 50 billionth time that as a parent, you have great influence in your child's sexual health and relationships. You just have to be open with your teenager. You wanna make sure that you can keep the conversation going. You don't have to tell them what to do. You can guide them and have them be autonomous in what their choices will be next. Try not to use the D word. Disappointed. Sexual activity is a part of life. You wouldn't be here without it. And while sex is a part of life, educating them should be too. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, comment, I guess. Email me. I'll see you later.